billionaire invited Black Maid as a joke, but what arrived was a goddess that shocked the whole room. He expected a simple stunt, a laugh among the elite, but the moment she stepped in, everything changed. She wasn't just a maid. Her presence radiated dignity, power, and a history no one in the room could have imagined. As she sang softly, the laughter died, the cameras froze, and a single note revealed secrets, courage, and kindness hidden beneath polished facades. In that instant, the game of status and appearances shattered, forcing the billionaire to face the truth about himself, his world, and the people he thought he controlled. But outside the room, shadows stir, and the forces trying to exploit her generosity are closer than anyone knows. How could a single act of audacity turn a gala into a reckoning? And would justice, truth, and redemption find a way before it's too late? The late afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Carmichael penthouse, casting long shadows across Italian marble floors that had been polished to mirror-like perfection that morning. Crystal chandeliers caught the light, scattering rainbow prisms across walls adorned with museum-quality artwork. A Monet here, a small Picasso there, each piece carefully selected not just for its beauty, but for what it said about its owner. The air held hints of Dom Perignon champagne and fresh flowers, roses in deep crimson, stargazer lilies, and rare purple orchids arranged in towering displays that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The subtle scent of lemon polish mingled with the flowers, creating an atmosphere of pristine luxury. Elliot Carmichael sat perfectly still in his private dressing room as his personal stylist, Antoine, adjusted his hand-stitched Italian silk bow tie with meticulous care. In the mirror, he saw exactly what he wanted others to see: success made flesh, power personified. His silver hair was expertly cut, not a strand out of place. His midnight black tuxedo fit like a second skin across broad shoulders, and his presence commanded attention without saying a word. The gold cufflinks at his wrists, his father's, the only inheritance he'd kept, caught the light as he shifted slightly. "Perfect, Mr. Carmichael," the stylist murmured, stepping back with a deferential nod. "Absolutely perfect." The scene brought back a memory, sharp and clear as glass, cutting through the present moment. His father standing behind him 30 years ago, adjusting a much cheaper tie in a much smaller mirror with chipped edges, the smell of cheap aftershave instead of custom cologne. "Remember, son, appearances aren't everything, but they're the first thing people see, and first impressions last forever." His father's calloused hands had been so different from Antoine's smooth, practiced ones. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts, 3 precise taps that Elliot recognized immediately. "Come in," he called out, straightening his shoulders imperceptibly. Marcus Reed entered, tablet in hand, his own tuxedo already immaculate, not a wrinkle to be found. His face was composed into its usual mask of efficient competence. Security's in place at all entrances, catering's running exactly on schedule, and the guest list is locked in at 93 attendees. The photographer from Social Scene magazine is setting up in the main room, and she's been briefed on which angles you prefer. "Excellent." Elliot stood, brushing an invisible speck from his sleeve with manicured fingers. "And the board members? All confirmed?" His voice carried the easy confidence of someone who expected nothing less than perfect compliance. "All confirmed, every last one." Marcus nodded, scrolling through his tablet. "Though Richards is bringing his new wife, the third one, barely 30, so we've adjusted the seating chart accordingly. She's nowhere near the mayor's wife now." In the grand living room, with its 20-foot ceilings and panoramic views of Central Park, Vivian Lamont directed staff with elegant waves of her bejeweled hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light with every gesture. Her silver-grey hair was swept up in a classic French twist that defied gravity, her midnight blue Versace gown emphasizing her still, slim figure, maintained by thrice-weekly sessions with Manhattan's most exclusive personal trainer. "No, no!" she called out to a nervous-looking young man in uniform who was rearranging place cards. "The governor's place card goes there. We can't have him seeing the kitchen doors all evening, and for heaven's sake, make sure the senator is at least 3 seats away from the Goldman executive. They had that dreadful argument at the museum gala last month." The room buzzed with purposeful activity. Staff members in pressed black uniforms glided across the floor like dancers in a well-choreographed ballet, carrying crystal trays and adjusting golden place settings with white-gloved hands. The soft rustle of silk and designer fabrics accompanied every movement as early-arriving socialites darted in and out, making last-minute adjustments to hair and makeup in the penthouse's many strategically placed mirrors. Vivian spotted Elliot as he entered and made her way over, air-kissing his cheek with practiced precision, leaving not a trace of her signature red lipstick. "Darling, you look magnificent, the very picture of success." She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Though I've just had the most amusing thought. Positively wicked, really." "Do tell." Elliot accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server, who seemed to materialize exactly when needed, the bubbles dancing gold in the fading sunlight. "Well," she said, her red lips curving in a smile that didn't reach her eyes, which remained calculating and cold, "wouldn't it be absolutely divine if we invited one of those shelter people? You know, from that place your company funds as a tax write-off, as a sort of living display of your charitable work?" Elliot raised a perfectly groomed eyebrow. "A shelter resident? Here?" He gestured around at the crystal and silver, the priceless art and custom furniture. "Oh yes," Vivian continued, warming to her idea, her voice quickening with excitement. "Perhaps one of the Black Maids? The contrast would be so dramatic. It would make such a statement about your generosity. And imagine the photos. You, the generous benefactor, sharing your world with the less fortunate." She laughed, the sound like ice in crystal, brittle and sharp. The contrast would be simply stunning. Social scene would eat it up. Elliot found himself chuckling along, though something in his chest tightened uncomfortably, a faint warning bell that he pushed aside. It was the kind of laugh he'd perfected over years in boardrooms and charity galas, more about belonging than genuine amusement, a social currency he'd learned to spend wisely. It would certainly give people something to talk about, the ultimate conversation piece. Marcus, who had been hovering nearby making notes on his tablet, stepped closer with a slight furrow in his brow. "Sir, are you sure that's—" He began cautiously, but Elliot was already nodding, caught up in Vivian's excitement and the champagne's warm glow. "Why not? Have someone bring one of the shelter workers up, the one who's been there the longest, perhaps. Someone authentic." He turned to Vivian with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Happy?" She beamed, clapping her hands together like a child given a new toy. "Thrilled, absolutely thrilled. I'll make sure she's seated somewhere. Appropriate. Not too close to the Japanese ambassador, of course." With another tinkling laugh, she glided away to supervise the flower arrangements, already planning the scene in her mind. Marcus lingered, his face carefully neutral, though his fingers gripped the tablet a little tighter. "I'll have security arrange it immediately. They'll need to vet whoever comes up, of course." The room continued its elegant dance of preparation. A photographer in discreet black tested lighting angles, the flash capturing moments of crystal and silk, creating brief starbursts of light. Caterers arranged delicate hors d'oeuvres on silver trays, caviar on blinis, foie gras on toast points, each bite worth more than an hour of minimum wage work. The air grew heavy with expensive perfume and anticipation as the sun sank lower in the Manhattan sky, painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold that complemented the interior decor perfectly. Elliot moved through it all like a king in his castle, nodding approvingly at arrangements, stopping occasionally to adjust a flower or move a candle, but his father's voice echoed in his mind. "Appearances matter, son. They matter more than anything." The words felt different now, heavier somehow. He pushed the thought away and focused on the evening ahead. In 2 hours, the city's elite would fill these rooms, and everything had to be perfect. Nothing less would do. "Marcus," he called out across the room, his voice cutting through the ambient noise with practiced authority. "Make sure our guest from the shelter arrives within the hour. We'll want time to make sure she's properly prepared. Nothing too obvious, but presentable." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, already typing rapidly on his phone, his expression carefully blank. The last rays of sunlight painted the room in amber and gold, glinting off crystal and silver. And somewhere in the kitchen, a champagne cork popped with a sound like distant thunder, heralding the evening to come. The Manhattan twilight sparkled with camera flashes as guests stepped from their luxury cars onto the red carpet leading into the building. The cool evening air carried whispers of expensive perfume and the soft rustle of silk. Women in designer gowns worth small fortunes clutched tiny jeweled purses while their escorts adjusted black bow ties and checked platinum watches that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The paparazzi pressed against velvet ropes, calling out names with desperate familiarity, begging for just one more shot, one more glimpse of wealth and prestige. Inside the penthouse, with its soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers that cast diamonds of light across marble floors, Marcus Reed stood near the entrance. His perfectly tailored suit bore not a single wrinkle as he spoke in hushed tones with Sarah Chen, a young charity coordinator who couldn't stop fidgeting with her plastic name badge, its humble presence a stark contrast to the diamonds and gold surrounding them. "I really don't feel comfortable with this," Sarah whispered, her eyes darting nervously around the room filled with Manhattan's elite. "These people volunteer their time. They work hard to make a difference. They're not props for entertainment or whatever this is supposed to be." Marcus's expression remained carefully neutral, though his jaw tightened slightly, a tiny tell of his discomfort that he quickly mastered. "I understand your concerns," he replied in that smooth, corporate voice. "But Mr. Carmichael specifically requested, well, you know how important this evening is for the company's image." I know. Sarah checked her phone for the 5th time in as many minutes. "She should be here any minute. I just hope—" She trailed off, unwilling to voice her worries about what might actually be planned for the evening. In the grand dining room, with its stunning view of the city skyline twinkling like fallen stars, Vivian held court at the head table. Her diamond necklace caught the light with every movement of her perfectly poised neck. Her laugh cut through the gentle music from the string quartet positioned in the corner, a sharp, practiced sound designed to draw attention. And then she tried to tell me her handbag was authentic, as if I wouldn't know the difference between genuine crocodile and that factory-made nonsense. She leaned in conspiratorially, red lips curved into a smile that never quite reached her eyes. The circle around her tittered appropriately, champagne glasses raised in solidarity. A taxi pulled up outside, its yellow paint chipped in places and starkly ordinary against the line of gleaming black luxury vehicles with their discreet chauffeurs. Grace Amara stepped out, taking a moment to pay the driver with bills from a simple wallet. She smoothed her simple navy dress with careful hands. It wasn't designer, but it was clean and well kept, like everything else about her. The fabric, though modest, draped with quiet dignity across her frame. She carried a small leather satchel that had seen better days, but still held its shape with the same quiet dignity its owner possessed. The doorman, accustomed to greeting guests whose shoes cost more than his weekly salary, hesitated for just a moment before opening the door for her. Grace met his eyes and smiled warmly, a genuine connection in a sea of practiced indifference. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but clear, carrying a warmth that momentarily transformed his professional smile into something real. Sarah hurried forward through the crowd, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. "Ms. Amara, I'm so sorry about the last-minute invitation. There wasn't time to explain properly. Mr. Carmichael insisted you be here tonight and—" Her words tumbled out, tinged with anxiety. "It's all right," Grace replied, her steady gaze taking in the room with its crystal and silk and carefully constructed impressions. Her eyes missed nothing. Not the curious stares, not the whispered comments. "Though I admit I'm curious about the urgent need for my presence at such a grand affair." The other guests were noticing her now. Whispers fluttered around the room like autumn leaves caught in a breeze. A woman wearing diamonds worth more than most houses covered her laugh with a manicured hand, leaning toward her companion. "Is that her? The shelter worker? Good heavens, where did she find that dress?" Grace's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted slightly. Not defensive, but more present, more grounded, as if she were planting her feet more firmly on the earth beneath the Italian marble floors. Vivian approached, champagne flute held delicately between long fingers, her smile as sharp as her stilettos that clicked purposefully across the floor. "Welcome, dear. How lovely of you to join us." Her gaze flickered over Grace's simple attire, lingering just long enough to make her assessment clear. She gestured imperiously to a passing server. "Do get her something to drink. Something simple, perhaps. A club soda?" "Water would be perfect, thank you," Grace replied, her voice carrying a hint of warmth that somehow made Vivian's condescension seem small and petty in comparison. The server nodded, meeting Grace's eyes with quiet appreciation. The guests were gathering now, drawn by some invisible current, by the promise of what they expected would be prime entertainment, the fish out of water, the charity case among the elite. Elliot appeared at Vivian's side as if materialized from the expensive air itself, champagne in hand, his smile practiced and camera ready. "Ah, you must be our guest from the shelter. We're so pleased you could join us on such short notice." Grace turned her steady gaze to him, neither intimidated nor impressed by his wealth or position. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Carmichael. Though I should mention, I'm not actually from the shelter. I volunteer there, just as many others do. People from all walks of life give their time." A slight flush crept up Elliot's neck, barely visible above his perfectly knotted tie. Of course. My mistake." He recovered quickly, his smile never faltering. "Please, won't you tell us about your work? I'm sure everyone would be fascinated to hear about your experiences." The room leaned in, wine glasses tilted at identical angles, anticipating something they could quietly mock over dessert, a story they could later retell with exaggerated details. Instead, Grace smiled gently, a smile that somehow seemed to illuminate her from within. "Actually, if you're interested, I'd love to share something else." She paused, looking around the room at the expectant faces. "Would anyone like to hear a story about service, about what it truly means to give? Or perhaps—" Her voice softened, taking on a quality that made several people lean closer without realizing it. "I could share a song I used to sing to my mother when I cared for her during her final years." The guests exchanged glances, uncertainty rippling through the carefully curated atmosphere. This wasn't the entertainment they'd expected. Someone in the back coughed awkwardly. A woman whispered something behind her hand to her neighbor. A song? Vivian's voice dripped with barely concealed disdain, her eyebrows arching perfectly. How quaint. I don't believe we scheduled an amateur performance this evening. It's quite simple, Grace continued, completely unruffled by Vivian's barb. Just a little melody I learned during my time at the Juilliard Opera Academy, before I chose a different path. She spoke without pretense, stating facts rather than seeking approval. The word opera, and especially Juilliard, caused a subtle but immediate shift in the room. Several guests straightened slightly in their chairs, their expressions moving from dismissive to curious, reassessing the woman before them. Even Elliot's gaze sharpened with newfound interest. As the first course was being served by silent, efficient waitstaff, Grace stood quietly amid the clink of silver against fine china. She took a small breath, her posture changing in a way that somehow made the space around her seem larger, more resonant. Her chest expanded slightly, her shoulders relaxed, but strong. The string quartet fell silent mid-measure, their bows hovering over strings as they sensed something was about to happen. The room waited, conversations dying mid-sentence, glasses paused halfway to lips as Grace prepared to sing. Even the servers stopped their practiced movements, frozen in place by the sudden hush that had fallen over the gathering, by the presence of something genuine about to emerge in this carefully constructed world. The first note floated through the air like a shaft of sunlight, breaking through clouds. Grace's voice, pure and crystalline, filled the penthouse with an ethereal warmth that stopped conversations mid-sentence. She sang Ave Maria, but not as a performance, rather as a prayer, intimate and genuine, the way she had shared it with her mother. Mrs. Henderson, a steel-haired socialite known for her cutting remarks, pressed a silk handkerchief to her eyes. Beside her, a young boy who had been playing games on his mother's phone looked up, transfixed, and began to hum softly along. A champagne glass slipped from someone's fingers, but the server caught it before it shattered, the golden liquid suspended in its arc through the air. No one noticed. All eyes were on Grace, whose presence had transformed from an expected source of entertainment into something altogether different. The photographer who had been circulating through the party slowly lowered his camera, forgetting to document the moment in his need to simply experience it. The string quartet members exchanged glances of professional appreciation, recognizing the technical mastery behind Grace's seemingly effortless delivery. Elliot stood near the windows, his usual mask of confident control slipping. His jaw had gone slack, and something in his eyes looked almost lost. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected her. The woman he had intended to make a spectacle of was instead commanding the room with quiet dignity. Vivian's perfectly maintained smile had frozen, then faded entirely. She gripped her martini glass too tightly, knuckles white against the stem. This wasn't how the evening was supposed to go. The joke was unraveling, transforming into something that made her own cruelty feel small and obvious. Simply magnificent, whispered a renowned conductor who had been invited for his social connections rather than his musical expertise. Metropolitan opera quality, without question. As Grace's voice soared through the final phrases, Amanda Chen, a junior socialite eager to maintain her social media presence, saw an opportunity. She quickly snapped a photo of Elliot standing uncomfortably beside Grace, his discomfort and her radiance captured in perfect contrast. With manicured fingers, she typed, "When your charity case outshines you at your own gala." Awardward moment. Elliot Carmichael. Who is she real is? The song ended on a note that seemed to hover in the air like morning mist. For several seconds, no one moved or spoke. Then applause erupted. Not the polite, measured kind usually heard at such events, but genuine and enthusiastic. "Brava!" called out several voices. The young boy who had been humming asked his mother, "Can she sing another one?" Elliot watched as guests who had earlier smirked at Grace's arrival now pressed forward to speak with her. Their expressions had transformed from condescending amusement to genuine admiration. Some asked about her training, others about her work at the shelter, and a few even inquired about making donations. The rest of the evening took on a different tone. The planned entertainment, a famous jazz quartet, seemed almost pedestrian in comparison. Grace remained gracious but reserved, deflecting attention rather than seeking it. She spoke quietly with those who approached her about the shelter's needs and the community's challenges, never once mentioning the earlier attempts to humiliate her. Meanwhile, Amanda's post was gaining traction. Notifications lit up phones around the room as the photo began to circulate through Manhattan's social circles. The hashtags multiplied, and comments ranged from scathing criticism of Elliot to genuine curiosity about the mysterious singer from the shelter. By 11 o'clock, Elliot had retreated to the edges of his own party. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone terribly wrong, yet he couldn't quite identify what it was. The laughter he'd expected had been replaced by something else, something that made him deeply uncomfortable. Was he being mocked in a different way, or was this discomfort coming from somewhere inside himself? He watched as Grace spoke with Mrs. Henderson, who was still dabbing at her eyes. The elderly socialite pressed a card into Grace's hands, insisting they meet for tea next week to discuss the shelter's needs. Other guests were doing the same, forming a genuine connection that had never been part of the evening's intended script. At 11:30, Elliot made his excuses and left his own gala. The drive to his apartment was quiet, but his mind was anything but silent. He kept hearing Grace's voice, seeing the genuine emotion on his guests' faces, and feeling increasingly unsure about his role in the evening's events. The usual comfort of his success and social position felt somehow hollow. His phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications about the trending photo, but he couldn't bring himself to look at them. Instead, he stared out the car window at the city lights, Grace's aria still echoing in his thoughts, making him feel both moved and unsettled in ways he didn't want to examine too closely. The car pulled up to his building just before midnight. Elliot stepped out into the cool night air, nodding to his doorman with less than his usual confidence. The elegant lobby felt empty despite its luxury, and the elevator ride to his private floor seemed longer than usual. He was alone with his thoughts, and for the first time in a very long time, he wasn't sure he liked their company. Elliot's phone buzzed so persistently it nearly vibrated off his nightstand. He grabbed it, squinting at the screen through sleepy eyes. 7:30 in the morning, and already hundreds of notifications lit up his display. What in the world? He muttered, sitting up in his silk pajamas. The first message was from Marcus. "Turn on Channel 4 now." On his bedroom's wall-mounted TV, Regina Walsh, the city's most feared gossip columnist, was speaking directly to the camera. Her signature pearls gleamed as she leaned forward with practiced concern. What can only be described as a shocking display of elitist cruelty at last night's Carmichael Foundation Gala. Sources confirmed that billionaire Elliot Carmichael arranged to have a homeless shelter resident brought in as entertainment for his wealthy guests. But the evening took an unexpected turn. Elliot's stomach clenched as footage from the gala appeared on screen. Someone had recorded Grace singing, her voice pure and powerful. The caption below read, "Opera-trained volunteer humiliates billionaire's attempt at mockery." His phone kept buzzing. Vivian's name flashed on the screen. He answered, and her voice came through sharp and defensive. "Elliot, darling, I just want to be clear that I had nothing to do with actually bringing her there. That was entirely your staff's doing. Vivian, we both know I simply must distance myself from this whole unfortunate incident. I'm sure you understand." She hung up before he could respond. Marcus called next. The hashtag #Carmichael cruelty is trending. We need immediate damage control. I'm drafting a statement about a misunderstanding. Hold on, Elliot interrupted, scrolling through his social media feed. The photo from last night seemed to be everywhere. Social justice NYC. Wealthy elite attempt to mock shelter volunteer backfires spectacularly. Grace Amara's dignity versus Carmichael's casual cruelty. Who is Grace Amara? Carmichael cruelty. Metro art scene. Former opera singer Grace Amara chose community service over Spotlight. Now Spotlight finds her anyway. Incredible voice, incredible story. NYC activist. Thread. Let's talk about how the wealthy treat vulnerable communities as entertainment. 123. Elliot clicked on a video clip of Grace singing. In the harsh morning light, away from the gala's champagne buzz, the pure beauty of her voice struck him differently. He remembered his own laughter at Vivian's suggestion, his casual agreement to have someone brought in for amusement. Shame, hot and unfamiliar, crawled up his throat. Elliot, are you listening? Marcus was still talking. We need to get ahead of this. I suggest a carefully worded apology and a large donation to... I'll call you back, Elliot said, ending the call. Across town, Grace woke in her modest apartment above the shelter where she volunteered. Sunlight streamed through simple curtains as she prepared for another day of work. She was making coffee when Sarah, one of the younger volunteers, burst in. Grace, have you seen this? Sarah thrust her phone forward, showing the viral photo and mounting comments. Grace took a careful sip of coffee. Yes, I saw it earlier. Aren't you upset? They tried to humiliate you. They tried. Grace agreed quietly. But that's their burden to carry, not mine. She rinsed her coffee cup in the sink. Mrs. Thompson needs help with her job application this morning. That's more important than social media drama. Sarah stared at her. But you could use this. Go on TV, tell your story. The shelter needs volunteers, not viral moments. Grace said firmly. She picked up her worn leather bag, the same one she'd carried to the gala. Coming? The computer lab opens in 10 minutes. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, Elliot paced. The usual strategies. Press releases, charitable donations, carefully crafted statements, felt hollow. For the first time in years, he remembered being young, watching his father handle a crisis by throwing money at it. The memory didn't bring its usual comfort. He called Marcus back. Find her. Who? Grace Amara. Find out where she is. I need to... He paused, unfamiliar with the words he needed to say. I need to apologize. Properly. A personal apology could be risky without proper PR preparation. Let me draft. No drafts, no press, just find her. The next few hours crawled by. Elliot cancelled his meetings, ignored Vivian's increasingly panicked texts, and watched as the story spread. Each new post, each shared video of Grace's performance, each angry comment made the knot in his stomach tighter. At 11:15, Marcus called back. Found her. She's at the Hope Harbor shelter on East 47th. She's been there all morning, helping people fill out job applications. Elliot stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city below. The same city where Grace was quietly going about her work, undistracted by the storm surrounding her name. He straightened his tie, a nervous habit from childhood. Have the car brought around. He told Marcus, I'm going to the shelter. Should I alert the press? No. Elliot's voice was firm. No press, no cameras, no statements. Just me. The shelter's walls were a faded yellow, worn down by years of service. Nothing like the sleek steel and glass of Carmichael Holdings that Elliot was accustomed to. The paint peeled slightly near the baseboards, telling silent stories of limited budgets and prioritized necessities. Elliot's Italian leather shoes clicked against worn linoleum as a grey-haired nun led him down the hallway. the sound somehow inappropriate in these humble surroundings, like an intrusion from another world. "I'm Sister Joan," she said, her voice warm but watchful, crow's feet crinkling at her eyes. "Grace is waiting in our meeting room. This way, please." She gestured with a weathered hand that had clearly spent decades in service. The meeting room was barely larger than his private bathroom at home. Mismatched chairs surrounded a scratched wooden table that held a simple glass pitcher of water and 3 chipped glasses of different heights and patterns. A single window let in pale afternoon light, illuminating dust motes floating lazily in the air. Grace sat quietly, wearing simple clothes, a blue sweater slightly pilled at the elbows, dark slacks that had seen better days. But she carried herself with the same quiet dignity that had commanded attention at the gala. Her hands were folded neatly on the table, no jewelry except for a small silver pendant. "Mr. Carmichael," she said, her voice melodic even when speaking softly. She gestured to a chair across from her. "Please sit. Thank you for coming." Elliot cleared his throat, adjusted his tie in a nervous gesture that felt foreign to his usually confident demeanor. The chair creaked slightly as he lowered himself into it. "Miss Zamara, I wanted to personally express my deepest regrets for last night's unfortunate situation. It was completely unacceptable. It was never my intention to— Why did you close the factory in Millbrook?" Grace's question was gentle but direct, her eyes searching his face without accusation, just honest inquiry. Elliot blinked, caught off guard by the abrupt change of topic. "I'm sorry. The textile mill, 2 years ago, 342 people lost their jobs." Grace's voice remained calm, factual. "Mrs. Chen from apartment 4B worked there for 27 years. She's 72 now, takes 3 buses to work at a dollar store. Her arthritis is getting worse, but she can't afford to retire." Sister Joan poured water into the glasses, her movements deliberate. The sound of water filling glass seemed unnaturally loud in the small room. She passed a glass to each of them, her eyes never leaving Elliot's face. "That was a business decision," Elliot said carefully, his words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "Market forces, overseas competition. Sarah Martinez's father worked there too." Grace continued, not unkindly but persistent. "He had a heart attack 3 months after the layoffs. No insurance. The family lost their house. Her mother works 2 jobs now. Sarah had to drop out of community college to help support her younger siblings." Elliot shifted uncomfortably in his chair, acutely aware of the disparity between his tailored suit and these stories of struggle. "I understand these transitions can be difficult, but I was singing at the Met," Grace said quietly, a brief flash of something like nostalgia crossing her face. "Featured roles, good reviews. My career was taking off. Then my mother had a stroke." She touched the small silver pendant at her neck, a gesture of remembrance. "The doctors said she needed full-time care. I had some savings from performances. Not much, but enough to help start. A few programs here. Job training, emergency rent assistance, small things that make a difference." "That's very admirable," Elliot said, instinctively reaching for his checkbook inside his jacket pocket. "Perhaps I could— Mr. Carmichael." Grace's voice was still soft, but it stopped him cold, her gaze steady and penetrating. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy or donations. I'm telling you because these people aren't numbers on a spreadsheet. They're not market forces. They're human beings whose lives were upended by decisions made in boardrooms by people who never had to look them in the eye." Sister Joan nodded slightly, her eyes steady on Elliot's face, weathered hands clasped in front of her on the table. "What would you have me do?" Elliot asked, an edge of frustration creeping into his voice. "Keep failing businesses open. That's not how the economy works. That's not how any of this works." "No," Grace agreed, surprising him with her candor. But maybe there are better ways to handle necessary changes, ways that don't destroy communities overnight, ways that consider human cost alongside profit margins. She slid a worn folder across the table, its edges soft from handling. These are some ideas we've developed: job retraining programs, phased transitions, local business incubators, community investment funds. We'd welcome your thoughts. Elliot stared at the folder, remembering his father's gruff voice from childhood. Business isn't charity, boy. The market doesn't care about feelings. But Grace wasn't asking for charity, he realized. She was asking for something else, something that made him deeply uncomfortable. Consideration, responsibility, a reckoning. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen reflexively. Marcus. Social media still trending. Grace's story going viral. Opera singer turned community angel. Great PR opportunity if we play it right. Call me ASAP. But Grace was watching him with those clear, expectant eyes, and suddenly PR opportunities seemed hollow, manufactured, cynical in the face of her authentic concern. I'll look into Millbrook, he heard himself say, surprised by his own sincerity. Review what happened there. See what can be learned. Thank you. Grace stood, smoothing her slacks with a graceful movement. That's all we ask. For now. Her words carried gentle weight, both acknowledgement and subtle promise that this conversation was just beginning. Sister Joan walked him to the door, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking slightly on the linoleum. The late afternoon sun slanted through dirty windows, casting long shadows across the hallway. Distant voices echoed from other rooms, children laughing, someone coughing, the mundane sounds of lives being lived in the margins. His driver waited at the curb, the luxury car looking absurdly out of place against the backdrop of the shelter's weathered brick exterior and the surrounding neighborhood of discount stores and pawn shops. Tell Marcus to send me everything on the Millbrook closure, he said into his phone as he slid into the back seat, the leather cool and familiar against his hands. Everything. Not just the financial reports. I want to know what happened to the people. The car pulled away from the curb, but Elliot's thoughts remained in that small room, with Grace's quiet voice listing names and lives he'd never considered before. He glanced back at the shelter, growing smaller in the rear window, and for the first time in years felt something shift inside him. Uncomfortable, but somehow necessary. Elliot's office glowed in the pre-dawn light as he spread another stack of papers across his mahogany desk. His jacket hung forgotten on a chair, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. Coffee cups littered the surface, 3 empties and 1 going cold. Atlas Manufacturing, he muttered, scanning a contract from 2 years ago. The numbers were clean, the signatures all proper. But something nagged at him. He pulled up old email threads on his laptop, searching for mentions of subcontractors. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Tell me you found something, Elliot said, rubbing his tired eyes. It's complicated, Marcus replied. Atlas outsourced to 6 smaller operations. Some of those companies don't even exist anymore. The paper trail gets muddy. Elliot's jaw tightened. How muddy? Let's just say there were some creative accounting practices. Nothing illegal, but nothing we want splashed across social media. Elliot stood, pacing to the window. Manhattan sparkled below, already humming with morning traffic. The board's getting nervous, Marcus continued. Thompson called twice this morning. They want this handled quietly. Maybe a small donation to the shelter, some positive PR. I need to know what really happened. Elliot cut in. He picked up Sister Joan's business card, turning it over in his hands. After Marcus hung up, Elliot dialed the shelter's number. Sister Joan answered on the second ring. Mr. Carmichael, she said, unsurprised. I wondered when you'd call. Tell me about Millbrook, he said. Everything. She did. For 45 minutes, she painted a picture in plain, careful words. The textile mill that had employed 3 generations. The nursing home where laid-off workers had cared for elderly residents. Names spilled out like water. Tom Chen, who'd trained dozens of new workers over 30 years. Maria Delgado, whose daughter dropped out of college to help pay bills. Jim Sullivan, who'd lost his house and moved in with his sister. Elliot took notes, his handwriting growing messier with each page. A knock at his door. Board meeting in 5 minutes. His assistant called. The boardroom was tense. 11 faces turned to him as he entered, some concerned, others calculating. This Grace Amara situation. Thompson began, leaning forward. It's sensitive. We need to protect shareholder value. The media's still running with it, added Sarah Chen, head of PR. But we can spin this. Make you the hero. Wealthy CEO learns valuable lesson, makes generous donation. People love redemption stories. Elliot stood at the window, back to the room. Below, people hurried along sidewalks, ducked into coffee shops, lived their lives. Just like in Millbrook, before the closures. What if it's not about spin? He said quietly. Excuse me. Thompson's voice sharpened. Elliot turned. What if we actually looked at what happened? Not just in Millbrook, everywhere we've cut costs through contractors and subcontractors? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Elliot, be reasonable. That's years of operations, hundreds of people. Elliot finished. Hundreds of people. The room fell silent. The stock price. Thompson started. We'll recover, Elliot said firmly. Book my jet for Thursday morning, Marcus. I'm going to Millbrook. That's not advisable, Marcus protested. Let me send a team to... No. Elliot gathered his papers. I need to see it myself. Back in his office, he looked again at the photo from the gala. Him standing awkwardly beside Grace as she sang. The caption below was cruel. Billionaires' poverty tourism backfires. But Grace's face showed no humiliation, only quiet strength. His father's voice echoed, Image is everything, boy. But maybe just this once, truth mattered more than image. He picked up his phone. Marcus, book 2 seats on the jet. I want you there too. Elliot, the quarterly reports are due and the board will wait. Thursday morning, Marcus. We're going to see what our decisions really cost. He ended the call and turned back to the window. Somewhere out there, in a small town he'd never visited, people were living with the consequences of choices he'd made without thinking. It was time to think. His phone buzzed again. More board members, more PR advisors, more voices urging caution and control. He silenced it, opened Sister Jones' folder, and kept reading. The rental car's tires crunched over broken asphalt as Elliot drove into Millbrook. Marcus sat silently beside him, tapping notes into his tablet. They'd left their usual suits behind, wearing plain button-downs and khakis instead. Population 8,000. Marcus read. Down from 12,000 5 years ago. Elliot slowed the car. Main Street stretched before them, a row of brick buildings with faded signs. For lease signs dotted empty storefronts like missing teeth. The sidewalks were cracked, weeds pushing through. The mill's that way. Marcus pointed. They turned onto Industrial Road. The Atlas Manufacturing Building loomed ahead, a sprawling complex of red brick and rusted metal. Chain-link fence surrounded it, topped with sagging barbed wire. A sign creaked in the wind. Atlas Manufacturing, quality since 1926. Pull in here, Marcus said suddenly. Betty's Diner. Good place to get local intel without drawing attention. The bell chimed as they entered. Morning. Regulars hunched over coffee cups at the counter. A tired-looking waitress approached with menus. Just passing through?" she asked, leading them to a booth. "Something like that," Elliot replied. "I used to work with Atlas, heard about the closure." The waitress, her name tag read Helen, stiffened slightly. "That affected everyone here. My brother-in-law worked there 30 years. An older woman at the counter turned. "You from Atlas?" Her voice was sharp. "My Eddie died 6 months after they shut down. 38 years on the floor, then nothing. The stress killed him as sure as anything." "I'm sorry," Elliot said quietly. "What was his name?" "Eddie Martinez." She stood, approaching their table. "I'm Clara. He ran the dyeing department, trained dozens of people. Had arthritis so bad some days he could barely hold a cup, but he never missed a shift." From the end of the counter, a man with military bearing spoke up. "Same here. Jack Turner, former Army, 20 years at Atlas after serving. Now my hands are too stiff for most work, and nobody's hiring guys my age anyway." Elliot felt the weight of their gazes. What happened after the closure? What didn't happen? Clara said bitterly. The nursing home went next. Half their residents had family working at Atlas who couldn't afford the bills anymore. Then stores started closing. Young people left. Houses got foreclosed. Some help came. Helen added, "That nice Miss Amara set up programs at the community center. Art classes for kids, rent assistance for families. Never wanted credit for it either." Elliot's coffee grew cold as they talked. More people joined in, sharing stories of lives upended. Marcus took quiet notes. After breakfast, they drove to the mill. Up close, the violations were obvious. Broken windows, crumbling concrete, rust everywhere. A faded safety notice fluttered on the fence, dated 2 months before closure. "Sir," Marcus said softly. The board never saw reports about these conditions. They walked the perimeter. Behind the mill, empty parking lots stretched to the horizon. A paper tumbled past, an old layoff notice, hundreds of names in neat columns. The nursing home was next, windows boarded, wheelchair ramp sagging. A sign announced, "Millbrook Care Center, closed. Please contact Valley Regional for patient transfers." At the community center, children's artwork decorated the walls. A pottery class was in session, elderly hands carefully shaping clay. "It helps with the arthritis," the instructor explained. "Miss Amara started this program. Such a quiet woman, but she understood what people needed. Not just money, dignity, purpose." A woman organizing supplies looked up sharply. "You know Grace? She saved this place, used her own savings for rent assistance, never wanted recognition, said she knew what it was like to watch someone suffer and be unable to help." Elliot touched a child's painting. A family holding hands, a dark factory in the background. His chest felt tight. "Time to head back," Marcus said gently. It was late afternoon. They drove to the airport in silence. As the private jet lifted off, Elliot watched Millbrook's lights grow smaller below. "Marcus," he said finally, "draft a proposal, full remediation program, job training, healthcare support, small business grants. And find out how much Grace spent here. We're reimbursing every penny." "The board won't like it." "The board doesn't have to." Elliot's voice was firm. "This isn't about image anymore. It's about fixing what we broke." The jet banked toward Manhattan, leaving Millbrook's wounded heart behind. But its stories traveled with them, demanding answers, requiring change. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Elliot's corner office as he scrolled through the latest headlines. His coffee sat untouched. "Silent Guardian. The truth about Grace Amara," read one headline. Below it, a detailed investigation revealed years of careful, anonymous donations to Millbrook's community programs. "She used her opera earnings," Elliot murmured, reading further. Small amounts, but consistent. Rent assistance, art therapy, even a food pantry. Marcus burst in, tablet in hand. Sir, it's everywhere. The Times just ran a feature on her background. Opera career, caring for her mother, then all this charity work. They're calling her a modern-day saint. And us? Elliot asked quietly. Mixed. Some outlets are praising the humbling of a billionaire. Others? Marcus hesitated. They're having a field day with how we invited her without knowing who she was. Billionaire mistakes philanthropist for Maid is trending. The PR team filed in for their emergency meeting. Sarah Chen, head of communications, spread printouts across the conference table. We need to get ahead of this, she insisted. Release a statement praising Grace's work. Position ourselves as allies. No. Elliot's voice was firm. No more spin. We're going transparent. Marcus went pale. Sir, the liability. I've seen Millbrook. Elliot stood, pacing. The violations at Atlas, the nursing home closure, all of it. While we were chasing quarterly profits, Grace was using her savings to help people we hurt. The shareholders, Marcus began. We'll have to deal with it. Elliot turned to the window. Draft a full disclosure statement. Safety violations, contractor issues, everything. And prepare a remediation proposal. Job training, healthcare support, small business grants. Sarah's fingers flew across her laptop. What's our narrative angle? The truth. We made mistakes. We're fixing them. Elliot paused. And we're asking Grace to oversee the community programs. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. The stock will tank. We're talking millions in shareholder value. Then it tanks. Elliot's voice was steel. Sometimes doing right costs money. The meeting dispersed, leaving tension in its wake. By afternoon, new headlines emerged. Carmichael Holdings to announce major community initiative. But darker currents were stirring. A tabloid website posted a suspicious article. Questions arise about mystery philanthropist. It cited an anonymous source claiming to have evidence of forged donation records. It's garbage, Marcus reported, dropping a printout on Elliot's desk. But it's getting traction. Someone's trying to discredit her. Elliot studied the alleged documents. These invoices are obvious fakes. Who would... His phone buzzed. Sarah. Sir, we have a problem. Someone leaked board documents about the Atlas closure. They're trying to pin everything on Grace, suggesting she orchestrated this for attention. At the shelter, Grace was sorting donated clothes when Sister Joan found her. The older nun's hands trembled as she held out an envelope. This came for you, dear. No return address. Grace opened it carefully. Inside, a single typed line. Stay quiet or we'll make sure no one believes you. She showed it to Sister Joan, who immediately called Elliot. Within an hour, security teams were reviewing shelter footage while Grace continued her work, refusing to be intimidated. We should postpone the announcement. Marcus argued in Elliot's office that evening. Let this die down. No. Elliot's voice was cold. Someone's trying to silence her because we're finally doing the right thing. That stops now. He picked up his phone. Get me our investigators. I want to know who's behind those forged documents. 3 days of media frenzy had transformed a simple gala moment into a national conversation about wealth, responsibility, and quiet dignity. As night fell over Manhattan, Elliot drafted an email to Grace. I've seen Millbrook. I understand now. Will you help us make it right? The cursor blinked, waiting for him to press send, while somewhere in the city, someone prepared their next move against a woman whose only crime was helping others without seeking praise. The headline hit like a thunderbolt across news sites and social media. Fraud at the shelter. Grace Amara's web of lies exposed. The tabloid story spread faster than wildfire, complete with images of supposedly leaked documents showing Grace had diverted hundreds of thousands from Carmichael Holdings through fake charities. Grace first saw it on her phone while serving breakfast at the shelter. Her hands trembled slightly as she read, but her voice remained steady. "Sister Joan, could you come look at this?" The older nun's face darkened as she scanned the article. "This is nonsense. These numbers don't even match our records." "I know." Grace set down her phone carefully. "But they've made it look real enough to fool people who want to believe it." Within hours, the story was everywhere. Social media exploded with accusations. The same people who'd praised Grace's quiet generosity now called her a con artist. Camera crews gathered outside the shelter, forcing Sister Joan to lock the doors. "We're filing a police report," Sister Joan declared, her voice firm. "Right now." At the precinct, Grace sat straight-backed in a hard plastic chair, answering questions with careful precision. "No, I've never had access to Carmichael funds. Yes, I can provide my banking records. The donations came from my savings, every penny documented." The desk sergeant looked skeptical, but took notes. Across town, Elliot's office had become a war room. He paced like a caged lion, phone to his ear. "I want every document traced, every signature verified. Someone's trying to frame her, and I want to know who." Marcus hovered nearby, his face a mask of concern. "Sir, the board is in panic mode. The stock's down 12 points already." "To hell with the stock." Elliot slammed his hand on his desk. "Someone's using my company's name to destroy an innocent woman." But privately, after Elliot stormed into another meeting, Marcus slipped away to a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. A sleek woman in an expensive suit waited at a corner table. "This needs to go away," Marcus muttered, sliding into the seat. "Whatever it costs." The reputation manager smiled thinly. "We have options, but they're not cheap." Marcus's phone buzzed constantly during their conversation. Texts, emails, urgent calls. His responses were clipped, nervous. Back at the shelter, Grace sat with Sister Joan, sorting through years of donation records. Their careful paperwork formed neat stacks, a stark contrast to the crude forgeries circulating online. "The dates don't even match," Sister Joan pointed out. "Look, they claim you transferred money in March 2020, but you were still at the hospital with your mother then." Grace nodded, her fingers tracing the real receipts. "The truth will come out. We just have to be patient." But patience was hard to maintain as social media turned ugly. Cruel memes spread. Talking heads on cable news debated her character. Someone spray-painted "thief" on the shelter's wall. Elliot watched it all with growing fury. In his office, he assembled a team of forensic accountants and investigators. Take it apart. Every document, every signature, every pixel. Find me who did this. The board called an emergency meeting. In the mahogany-lined conference room, nervous executives talked over each other. "We need distance from this. The liability exposure. Perhaps a statement denouncing—" "Enough!" Elliot's voice cut through the chaos. "We're not running from this. We're fighting it." In the 27th precinct, Detective Hannah Ortiz reviewed the case file with careful attention. 20 years on the force had taught her to trust her instincts. Something about these forgeries felt off, too neat, too convenient. She picked up her phone and dialed the shelter. "Sister Joan, this is Detective Ortiz. I've been assigned to investigate the fraud allegations. Could we meet tomorrow morning?" "Of course," the nun replied. "The sooner the better." Hannah spread the documents across her desk, the real records Grace had filed, the forged versions from the tabloid, bank statements and email threads. She began making notes, drawing connections. The next 48 hours became a blur of accusations and investigation. Grace kept working at the shelter, her calm presence a rebuke to the chaos swirling around her. Sister Joan fielded calls from reporters and concerned donors. Elliot's team combed through company records. And in quiet corners, Marcus made more nervous phone calls, each one adding another link to a chain that would soon become visible. Detective Ortiz worked methodically, gathering statements and evidence. She noted the precision of Grace's records and the suspicious convenience of the forgeries. Most telling were the timestamps on the leaked emails. They didn't match Carmichael's server logs. By the second evening, Grace sat alone in her small apartment, looking at old photos of her mother. Outside, reporters still camped on the sidewalk. Her phone buzzed with another anonymous message. "You should have stayed quiet." She didn't delete it. Instead, she forwarded it to Detective Ortiz, then returned to sorting donation receipts. The truth was in these papers somewhere. She just had to trust it would be found. The Carmichael Holdings boardroom crackled with tension. Morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table where board members shifted restlessly in their leather chairs. "The stock has dropped 28%. Gerald Matthews, head of the finance committee, stabbed his finger at a chart displaying a sharp downward line. "We're hemorrhaging shareholder value." Elliot stood at the window, his back to the room. The city sprawled before him, his empire, built over 3 decades, now threatening to crumble in 2 weeks. This situation requires immediate containment. Sarah Chen, chief legal counsel, spread documents across the table. "The exposure is catastrophic. These fraud allegations, whether true or not, create massive liability." "They're not true." Elliot's voice was steel. "That's irrelevant right now." Matthews shot back. "The market perception is what matters. We need decisive action to stabilize confidence." Elliot's phone buzzed, a message from Vivian. "Be careful, darling. Sometimes stepping back is the wisest move. Don't let pride destroy everything you've built." The words stung more than he expected. He remembered her laughter at the gala, how easily she'd suggested inviting Grace as entertainment. Now she was advising caution from a safe distance. "The board proposes a temporary leadership transition." Chen continued. "Just until this situation resolves, it's standard crisis management." "You want me to step down?" Elliot finally turned to face them. "To step aside." Matthews corrected smoothly. "Temporarily. For the good of the company." The discussion raged for hours. Elliot fought, argued, presented alternatives, but as the market continued its plunge and more shareholders called demanding action, his position weakened. That evening, he stood in his penthouse office, placing personal items in a small leather bag. Family photos, his father's watch, a card his mother had written before she died. "Remember who you are." His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News alerts, worried messages, demands for comment. He ignored them all, focusing on the task at hand. Each item he packed felt like admitting defeat. The public announcement went out at 9 a.m. the next morning. Elliot Carmichael to take temporary leave from CEO duties pending internal investigation. Social media exploded. Some praised the board's decisive action, others spun conspiracy theories. The stock stabilized slightly, then resumed its decline. Grace's situation grew worse. Hate mail flooded the shelter. Someone threw a brick through her apartment window. Sister Joan insisted she stay at the convent for safety. "I won't hide," Grace said quietly, sweeping up broken glass. "That's what they want." Detective Hannah Ortiz watched all this unfold from her precinct desk, methodically building her case file. Something about the timing of the forged documents bothered her. The metadata didn't match. Server logs showed inconsistencies. Elliot spent his days in a small office he'd rented under an alias, working through company records. His nights were sleepless, haunted by memories of casual cruelties he'd ignored or enabled over the years. The gala had been just one moment in a pattern he was only now seeing clearly. He thought of Grace, still showing up at the shelter despite everything. Her dignity in the face of hatred shamed him. A week into his suspension, he received an encrypted message from Detective Ortiz requesting a meeting. They met at midnight in an all-night diner in Queens, far from corporate eyes. Hannah spread photos across the Formica table. "Look at these timestamp anomalies." She pointed to highlighted sections. "And these routing headers. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make these forgeries look authentic, but they made mistakes." Elliot studied the documents, his jaw tight. "Someone inside my company did this. Someone with access to internal systems." Hannah agreed. "But not complete access. They got sloppy trying to cover their tracks." Elliot thought of Marcus's nervous energy lately, the whispered phone calls, the reputation management firm. A pattern was emerging. "I don't care what it costs me," he said finally. "My reputation, my company, none of it matters if we don't make this right." Hannah gathered her evidence carefully. "Be prepared. Following this trail could expose more than just the forgeries. There might be other irregularities we uncover." "Good." Elliot's voice was firm. "It's time for everything to come to light." He left the diner and walked through the quiet pre-dawn streets, feeling oddly lighter despite everything. For the first time in weeks, he knew exactly what he had to do. His phone buzzed, another message from Vivian, this one less friendly. "Don't do anything foolish, Elliot. Some boats are better left unrocked." He deleted it without responding. The old rules of social power and appearance no longer mattered. There was only the truth, and what it would cost to reveal it. Detective Hannah Ortiz sat at her desk, surrounded by stacks of printouts and digital logs. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. The metadata from the forged invoices kept pulling her attention back to inconsistencies that shouldn't exist. "These timestamps don't match up," she muttered, comparing document creation dates. The invoices, supposedly from 2021, showed hidden metadata from 2023. Someone had tried to backdate them, but hadn't cleaned up all the digital fingerprints. She picked up her phone and dialed the PR firm's office again. "This is Detective Ortiz. I need to speak with your IT department about some email headers." The receptionist's voice was polite but rehearsed. "I'll transfer you to our legal team." Hannah sighed. 3 days of stonewalling. But something had to break. In a cramped cubicle across town, Daniel Park's hands shook as he stared at his computer screen. The chat logs were right there, explicit instructions about creating fake documents, inserting Grace's name, making everything look legitimate. He'd been copied on the threads by mistake. Junior accountants weren't supposed to see this level of operation. His stomach churned. He'd taken this job hoping to gain experience, maybe move up to bigger firms. Instead, he was watching his bosses destroy an innocent woman's life. Daniel Googled Detective Ortiz's name and found the precinct number. His finger hovered over the phone. Making this call could end his career. Not making it would haunt him forever. At the shelter, Sister Joan was serving lunch when her phone buzzed. "This is Sister Joan." "Sister, this is Detective Ortiz. I have someone here who needs a safe place to talk. Someone with information about Grace's case." 20 minutes later, Daniel sat in Sister Joan's small office, tears streaming down his face as he showed them the chat logs on his laptop. "They said it was just reputation management," he whispered. "But they fabricated everything. The invoices, the emails, all of it. They even discussed which dates to use to make it look like a long-term scheme." Hannah recorded his statement carefully while Sister Joan held his trembling hands. The young man's courage moved her. She knew what it cost him to come forward. "The instructions came through a special channel," Daniel continued. "But I tracked the original requests. They came from someone using the name Carlson and Reed." Hannah's head snapped up. Marcus Reed. The connection she'd been looking for. Back at her desk, she dove into the technical analysis. The forged emails had sophisticated header spoofing, but every fake leaves traces. She followed the digital breadcrumbs, IP addresses, login times, server requests. Got you, she breathed, looking at her screen. A laptop had accessed the PR firm's secure server late at night, right when the forgeries were uploaded. The location? Marcus Reed's office at Carmichael Holdings. She cross-referenced expense reports. There it was, a 6-figure payment to the PR firm, approved by Carlson and Reed Consulting, the day before the fake documents hit the press. Hannah gathered her evidence meticulously. Daniel's testimony, the chat logs, the email headers, the expense approval, the IP traces. Together, they painted a clear picture of deliberate fraud. She called Elliot and arranged to meet privately at a quiet cafe. The evidence is solid, she told him, sliding over a sealed envelope. The forgeries trace back to your PR firm, and the authorization leads directly to Marcus Reed. Elliot's face was ash-gray as he reviewed the documents. My own COO, he said quietly. He did this to protect the company, to protect me in his mind. He did it to protect himself. Hannah corrected gently. The investigation into Grace's claims would have exposed other irregularities. This was a preemptive strike. Elliot nodded slowly. What happens next? We have probable cause for criminal charges. Fraud, defamation, conspiracy. The DA's office is reviewing the case now. Good. Elliot's voice was firm. No more covering things up. No more protecting reputations at the expense of truth. Hannah gathered her files. The truth's been there all along. Sometimes we just need someone brave enough to point it out. She thought of Daniel, risking everything to do what was right. As she left the cafe, her phone buzzed with a text from Sister Joan. Daniel's safe. Grace is with him now. She says to tell you thank you. Hannah smiled slightly. 1 week of intensive investigation had unraveled what powerful men had tried to hide. Now justice could finally begin. The conference room felt like a tomb. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, but the air was heavy with tension. Elliot sat perfectly still, hands folded on the polished table, watching Marcus fidget with his tie. Legal counsel sat to one side, Detective Hannah on the other. The evidence lay between them in a neat manila folder. Would you like to explain these documents, Marcus? Elliot's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of betrayal. Marcus straightened his shoulders, attempting to project confidence. I'm not sure what you're referring to specifically. The forged invoices, the fake emails, the 6-figure payment to Meridian PR approved under a shell company name. Elliot spread the papers across the table. Your laptop's IP address accessing their servers at 2 a.m. Color drained from Marcus's face. He glanced at the lawyer, then back at Elliot. There must be some mistake. We have testimony from a whistleblower at the PR firm. Hannah interjected. Chat logs showing. Explicit instructions to fabricate evidence against Grace Amara. Marcus's hands began to shake. He reached for his water glass, but knocked it over, sending water cascading across the table. No one moved to clean it up. I was protecting us, he whispered finally. The stock was in freefall. Board members were threatening to jump ship. We couldn't let some charity case destroy everything we'd built. Elliot's jaw tightened. Grace Amara is not a charity case. She's a woman who exposed real problems in our corporate practices. Exactly. Marcus stood suddenly, his chair scraping back. She was going to ruin us. All those displaced workers, the closed facilities, it would have been a PR nightmare. I had to do something. So you chose to destroy her reputation, to forge documents suggesting she committed fraud. I never meant... Marcus's voice cracked. He sank back into his chair. I just told the PR firm to handle it, to do whatever was necessary to protect the company's value. I thought they'd just discredit the gossip, spin it differently. I didn't know they'd go so far. But you approved the strategy, Hannah noted. And the payments. Tears welled in Marcus's eyes. Please, Elliot, you have to understand. I've given 20 years to this company. My entire career is here. When everything started falling apart, I panicked. You panicked? Elliot's voice rose slightly. So you authorized a criminal conspiracy to frame an innocent woman? I'm sorry, Marcus sobbed. I was wrong. I was so wrong. But I thought I was protecting us, protecting you. The board was breathing down my neck. The shareholders were screaming about their portfolios. I couldn't let it all collapse. Elliot stood slowly, placing both palms on the table. You didn't protect anything, Marcus. You betrayed everything this company should stand for. Basic integrity, human decency, the truth. We can fix this, Marcus pleaded. Issue a retraction, make a settlement offer. Please, Elliot, don't let one mistake ruin everything. One mistake? Elliot laughed bitterly. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated choice to hurt someone because they threatened our profit margins, because they dared to point out our failures. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Reed, I should advise you that anything you say can be used. I don't care anymore. Marcus interrupted. Yes, I did it. I authorized everything, but I was just trying to save our company. Hannah opened her notebook. I'll need a formal statement, and all correspondence related to this operation needs to be preserved. Elliot turned to stare out the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. Below, the city sprawled vast and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Grace was still helping people, still speaking truth, despite everything they'd done to silence her. Our company, he said softly, doesn't deserve saving if this is how we operate. He turned back to Marcus. We became exactly what Grace accused us of, being wealthy people who see others as disposable, who value money over morality. What are you going to do? Marcus whispered. I'm calling a press conference. Full disclosure. We're going to admit everything. The corporate failings Grace exposed, and the criminal conspiracy to discredit her. That will destroy us. No, Elliot said firmly. It will begin to redeem us. The truth matters more than stock prices. Marcus slumped in his chair, defeated. I'll lose everything. You lost everything the moment you chose to frame an innocent woman. Elliot replied. The only question now is whether you'll face that truth with dignity or continue trying to hide it. Hannah stood, gathering her notes. Mr. Reed, we'll need you to come down to the station to provide a formal statement. Your lawyer can accompany you. The morning light caught the tears on Marcus's cheeks as he nodded slowly. 20 years of carefully maintained power and prestige, undone by fear and desperate choices. Elliot watched his former friend leave with the detective and lawyer. The conference room felt vast and empty now, echoing with the weight of betrayal. He pulled out his phone to call the PR department, not Meridian this time, but their in-house team. Schedule a press conference, he instructed. Tomorrow morning, full media presence. He paused. And contact Grace Amara. She deserves to hear the truth directly from me before it goes public. The sun climbed higher outside, casting long shadows across the conference room table, where damning evidence still lay scattered. Evidence of how far people would go to protect their power, their money, their illusions of control. Elliot gathered the papers slowly, each document a reminder of choices made in darkness. Tomorrow he would bring everything into the light. The late afternoon sun slanted through Elliot's office windows as he sat with his small team of trusted advisors. Papers scattered across his desk showed multiple drafts of tomorrow's speech, each marked with corrections and crossed out lines. "Let's try this section again," he said, picking up the latest version. His voice was hoarse from hours of rehearsal. No corporate speak, no weasel words. His head of legal, Sarah Chen, nodded. "Remember, anything you say becomes part of the public record." "Good," Elliot replied. "I want it on record. All of it." He cleared his throat and read. "The fraud perpetrated against Grace Amara wasn't just a crime against one person. It was an attempt to silence truth with power, to protect profits at the expense of human dignity. I bear ultimate responsibility for creating a culture where such actions were considered acceptable." "That's very direct," Sarah cautioned. "The shareholders won't like it." "The shareholders need to hear it," Elliot said firmly. "We can't hide behind careful language anymore." Across town at Sister Joan's shelter, Grace sat in the small office she shared with other volunteers. The afternoon light made the room's worn furniture look softer, almost golden. "They want me to join the board's oversight committee," Grace told Sister Joan, "to help implement the remediation program." Joan's weathered face creased with concern. "And what do you want?" "I want real change," Grace said quietly. "Not just a symbolic position or a PR move. The community needs genuine involvement in decisions that affect their lives." "You could help make that happen," Joan suggested. Grace nodded slowly. "Yes, but it has to be structured right, with clear accountability and community representation, not just me alone in a boardroom full of executives." In the police precinct downtown, Detective Hannah methodically assembled her filing. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she checked each document: witness statements, digital forensics reports, email metadata analysis. The evidence trail was clean and clear. Her phone buzzed, a text from the district attorney's office confirming receipt of the affidavits. Another message indicated the CEO of Meridian PR firm had been notified of potential criminal charges. Hannah smiled grimly. The truth had a way of surfacing, even when buried under layers of corporate power. Back at Carmichael Holdings, Marcus stood in Elliot's office, his usual confidence completely deflated. "I've prepared my resignation letter," he said, holding out an envelope. Elliot didn't take it. "A resignation isn't enough, Marcus. What more do you want from me? I want you to face what you did, really face it, not just walk away with a golden parachute and start over somewhere else." Marcus's hand dropped. "You're right," he whispered. "I need to own this. All of it." "Yes," Elliot said. "We both do, in different ways." The day's meetings continued into evening. Elliot's team ordered dinner, working through draft after draft of the speech. Each version became clearer, more direct, more honest. As night fell, Elliot found himself unable to sleep. The weight of tomorrow's confession pressed on him. Around 2 a.m, he took the private elevator to the rooftop terrace where he'd hosted countless celebration parties. The city stretched out before him, a glittering tapestry of lights and shadows. He remembered standing here after major deals, toasting success with champagne, feeling invincible. Now the height made him dizzy with the magnitude of what he had to do. A cool breeze carried the faint sounds of traffic below. Elliot gripped the railing, letting the metals chill ground him in the moment. "No more hiding," he whispered to the night sky. "No matter what it costs." He thought of Grace's quiet dignity, of the town's boarded-up buildings, of Marcus's desperate attempts to protect profit over people. The truth would hurt. Him, the company, the shareholders. But continuing to hide it would hurt something far more valuable: their humanity. Elliot stayed on the roof until dawn began to pale the eastern sky. In a few hours, he would stand before cameras and tell the whole truth. Not for redemption or damage control, but because it was right. As he watched the sun rise over Manhattan, his phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Final draft ready for review. The day of reckoning had begun. His response was simple. No more changes. We tell it exactly as it happened. The morning light caught the windows of surrounding buildings, turning them to mirrors of flame. Elliot took one last look at the view he'd earned through decades of careful image management and deal-making. After today, everything would change. He straightened his shoulders and headed back inside to prepare. The truth was waiting, and he was finally ready to face it. The press hall buzzed with anticipation on Thursday morning. Camera crews adjusted their equipment, while journalists whispered among themselves, wondering what bombshell the suspended CEO might drop. Security personnel lined the walls, their faces stern and watchful. At exactly 9 o'clock, Elliot Carmichael stepped up to the podium. His usual polished confidence was replaced by something different, a quiet gravity that silenced the room. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady. "I'm here today to tell you the truth about Carmichael Holdings, about our failures, and about the damage we've caused to real people in real communities." The clicking of cameras intensified. In the back of the hall, Grace stood quietly beside Sister Joan, both women watching intently. 3 years ago, our company made decisions that devastated a small town in upstate New York. We outsourced manufacturing through Atlas Manufacturing, who then used subcontractors that violated safety and labor standards. We knew about complaints but chose to look away. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A reporter's hand shot up, but Elliot continued. The mill closure affected hundreds of families. The nursing home shutdown left elderly residents scrambling for care. These weren't just business decisions, they were moral failures. He paused, taking a sip of water. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice remained firm. More recently, when these issues came to light, members of our executive team authorized a smear campaign against Grace Amara, a woman whose only crime was showing us our own reflection. Our COO, Marcus Reed, working through Meridian PR firm, orchestrated the creation and distribution of forged documents attempting to discredit Ms. Amara. Gasps echoed through the hall. Phones began lighting up as reporters rushed to tweet the revelation. I take full responsibility for creating a corporate culture where such actions were considered acceptable. The fault lies not just with individuals, but with systems we built and values we corrupted. The first questions burst forth. "Mr. Carmichael, are you resigning? What about shareholder value? Will there be criminal charges?" Elliot raised his hand for quiet. "Today, I'm announcing immediate actions for repair. First, Carmichael Holdings is establishing an independent fund of $500 million for community remediation. This will be administered jointly by a board including Grace Amara, Sister Joan's nonprofit, and elected community representatives." More cameras flashed. Someone shouted about stock prices. "Second, we're launching a Jobs Plus program to bring manufacturing back to affected communities with full benefits and training. Third, we're creating a public endowment for ongoing community development with decisions made by local oversight boards, not corporate executives." A financial reporter stood up. "Sir, our analysts project these measures could drop share value by 30%. "Perhaps," Elliot replied. "But there are things more valuable than stock prices, like truth, like making amends, like doing what's right even when it's costly." Questions flew rapid fire. What about Marcus Reed? Will there be legal action? Are you expecting shareholder lawsuits? Marcus Reed has been terminated effective immediately. Elliot stated, "We are cooperating fully with law enforcement regarding the forged documents. As for lawsuits, we'll face whatever comes with transparency and accountability." The press conference continued for another hour. Trading was temporarily halted on Carmichael Holdings stock as the market absorbed the news. When trading resumed, shares dropped sharply, but began to stabilize as analysts noted the company's transparent approach. As security led Marcus Reed from the building, reporters swarmed him. His face was ashen, his usual commanding presence crumpled. Detective Hannah waited by a police car, ready to take his formal statement. After the cameras stopped rolling, Elliot found Grace in a quiet corner of the hall. She looked at him with those steady eyes that had first caught his attention at the gala. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For showing me what courage looks like. Real courage, not the manufactured kind." Grace nodded slowly. "The apology is accepted, conditionally. The community must have real control over these funds, not just advisory roles, but actual decision-making power." "Agreed," Elliot said. "Will you help shape that structure?" "Yes," she replied, "but not as a figurehead, as one voice among many who need to be heard." Sister Joan joined them, her practical wisdom grounding the moment. "The hard work begins now," she said, "making paper promises into real change." Outside, the media circus continued. Stock tickers scrolled across building facades, showing Carmichael Holdings down 22%, but stabilizing. Analysts were already praising the company's unprecedented transparency in crisis. By evening, Marcus Reed was giving his statement to Detective Hannah, his lawyer present. The PR firm's offices were being searched, and in the small town that started it all, people gathered in diners and living rooms, watching the news with cautious hope. The truth had cost millions in market value, but as Elliot had said, some things were worth more than money. The real work of repair was just beginning. 3 months later, after legal filings, board restructuring, and weeks of community planning meetings, the old Hartley's hardware store on Main Street began its transformation. The faded red brick building, with its tall windows and wooden floors worn smooth by decades of footsteps, would become the Amara Center. "The electrical needs updating," Elliot said, studying the exposed wiring with Jake Martinez, a former mill electrician. He'd shed his usual suit for jeans and a work shirt, sleeves rolled up. "We can handle that," Jake replied, his initial wariness softening. "Got 3 other guys from the mill who know their way around industrial systems." Grace moved through the space with Sister Joan and Maria Chen, the town's retired art teacher, mapping out classroom areas. Their voices echoed in the empty storefront as they discussed where to place workstations and meeting spaces. "The natural light here would be perfect for the art therapy corner," Grace said, touching the western wall. "And that alcove could become our counseling office." Days blended into weeks. Local contractors replaced windows and reinforced floor joists. Former factory workers, now wearing tool belts instead of safety gear, rebuilt walls and installed new plumbing. Elliot showed up regularly, not to supervise but to work alongside them, learning their stories between hammer swings and paint strokes. The governance board met every Tuesday evening in the town library. Grace insisted on a clear majority of local residents, people who understood the community's needs firsthand. Sister Joan brought her decades of social work experience, while Trevor Banks, a respected independent auditor, ensured financial transparency. "We need to prioritize practical skills training," said Sarah Williams, a former mill supervisor now serving on the board. "But also emotional support. People here lost more than jobs, they lost their sense of purpose." During one heated meeting, Tom Fletcher, who'd worked 30 years at the mill, confronted Elliot directly. "How do we know this isn't just another corporate show? Pretty buildings that'll be empty in 5 years?" Grace stepped in, her calm voice filling the tense silence. "That's why the community controls the endowment, Tom. We make the decisions, not Carmichael Holdings." By the 2nd month, the center's bones took shape. Local artisans crafted tables from reclaimed mill wood. A computer lab filled with donated equipment became a hub for digital skills training. The art therapy room glowed with afternoon light, while the job training wing hummed with the sound of new machinery. Veterans like Mike Reeves, who'd struggled after the mill closure, found purpose teaching younger workers. "These kids remind me of myself 30 years ago," he told Grace one afternoon. "Eager to learn, just need someone to show them how." Detective Hannah stopped by occasionally, bringing coffee and checking in. The legal proceedings against Marcus and the PR firm continued in the city, but here focus remained on rebuilding. Grace's presence anchored the center's growing programs. She taught voice lessons twice weekly, the sounds of singing drifting through the halls. But she also listened to elderly residents sharing memories, to young mothers worried about bills, to teenagers dreaming of college. "We're not just teaching jobs," she explained to Elliot as they unpacked art supplies one evening. "We're rebuilding confidence, connection, community." The apprenticeship program launched in the 4th month. 20 local residents began learning trades: green energy installation, digital manufacturing, healthcare support services. Each morning, they gathered in the main hall, determination visible on their faces. Lucy Chen, 72 and a former nurse, volunteered to mentor healthcare trainees. "These young ones need to learn compassion alongside technical skills," she said, watching her students practice patient care techniques. When friction arose, a heated argument about resource allocation, suspicious whispers about Elliot's motives, Grace navigated the tensions with quiet authority. She never dismissed concerns, but insisted on productive dialogue. "Your anger is valid," she told a group of skeptical residents. "Use it to help build something better. We need your voices in this process." By month 5, the center hummed with activity. Art therapy classes filled with participants of all ages. Job training sessions ran morning to evening. The community kitchen, staffed by volunteers, served lunch daily. Small victories accumulated. Maria Torres landed her first IT job. Jim Cooper's physical therapy practice hired 3 center-trained assistants. The Veterans Mentorship Program expanded to neighboring towns. Elliot noticed the subtle shifts during his weekly visits. People who once avoided eye contact now greeted him by name. Conversations moved beyond past grievances to future plans. One Tuesday afternoon, Grace found him helping install shelving in the library corner. "The opening ceremony invitations are ready for review," she said, holding out a simple card. The invitation read, "The Amara Center Opening Celebration, a Community Achievement." Below listed the date, 3 weeks away, and a simple request for RSVPs. "No corporate logos," Elliot noted. "No mention of Carmichael Holdings." Grace nodded. "This belongs to the town now. That was always the point." They stood together in the late afternoon light, watching volunteers arrange books on newly installed shelves, hearing laughter from the art room down the hall, and feeling the steady pulse of a community finding its way forward again. The October morning dawned crisp and clear, golden sunlight warming the brick facade of the Amara Center. Red and gold leaves scattered across the newly laid walkway, where chairs waited in neat rows. The aroma of warm apple cider and fresh-baked muffins drifted from the community kitchen, where local volunteers had been working since dawn. A modest crowd gathered, townspeople in their Sunday best, a cluster of journalists with cameras ready, Sister Joan beaming proudly beside Detective Hannah. Near the back, Elliot sat quietly with a small group of associates who'd chosen to stand with him rather than distance themselves after the scandal. The local choir, directed by Mrs. Peterson from the Methodist Church, began singing "Amazing Grace," their voices lifting clear and strong in the morning air. Grace stood at the podium, wearing a simple blue dress, her calm presence drawing all eyes. "This center," she began, her voice carrying naturally across the crowd, "belongs to all of us. Not to any corporation or individual, but to this community. Every decision about its future will be made by those who know this town's heart, its residents, its workers, its families. She gestured to the board members seated nearby. Sarah Williams, Tom Fletcher, Lucy Chen. Ordinary people who'd stepped up to guide the center's mission. Our strength lies in working together, in believing in each other's capacity to learn, grow, and contribute. The ribbon cutting was performed not by any dignitary, but by 3 generations of the Martinez family. Grandfather, who'd worked the mill for 40 years, father now training in green energy installation, and teenage daughter enrolled in the digital skills program. As people filed inside to tour the facilities, Vivian Lamont approached Grace quietly. Her usual polished armor seemed softer somehow. "I behaved abominably at the gala," she said, voice low. "I've spent months ashamed of my part in it. I'm truly sorry." Grace accepted the apology with characteristic grace, neither dismissing nor dwelling on the past hurt. "Thank you. Would you like to see our art therapy room? The children's paintings are quite remarkable." On the community bulletin board, amid job postings and class schedules, hung a small newspaper clipping. "Reed settlement finalized. Former COO to pay restitution." It was noted without fanfare, just another step in the healing process. 1 year later, the Amara Center hummed with activity on a warm autumn afternoon. In the workshop wing, Jake Miller, once a mill worker of 20 years, guided 2 apprentices through the intricacies of small engine repair. His business had grown steady enough to employ them part-time while they completed their training. "Never thought I'd be running my own shop," he told visitors, pride evident in his voice. "The microloan program gave me a chance to try, and turns out fixing things is what I was meant to do all along." In the Sunny Sewing Cooperative, Eleanor Watson, widowed 3 years earlier when the mill closure drove her husband to despair, worked alongside 5 other women, their machines creating a rhythmic backdrop to friendly conversation. Their handcrafted items sold well in local shops, and through an online marketplace, one of the digital skills graduates had helped them set up. "We support each other here," Eleanor said, smoothing a quilt with work-worn hands. "Not just with the sewing, but with everything. That's what community means." The center's programs had evolved based on local needs. The apprenticeship tracks now included sustainable agriculture and elder care. The microloan program had funded 15 small businesses. Weekly art therapy sessions helped people process grief and imagine new possibilities. As evening fell, twinkling lights came on in the center's garden, where residents gathered for a weekly community dinner. Elliot, visiting for a routine board meeting, helped carry chairs outside. He moved differently now, less the commanding CEO, more the quiet participant in something larger than himself. Grace found him later by the herb garden, where crickets chirped in the growing dusk. They stood in comfortable silence, watching fireflies rise from the lavender beds. "The funding is secure," he said finally. "The endowment's performing well, and the oversight structure is solid. The center will continue regardless of what happens to Carmichael Holdings." Grace nodded, understanding what he wasn't saying, that he'd ensured his own future choices couldn't impact the community's stability. "You've learned to listen well this past year. I had an excellent teacher." His smile held rueful acknowledgement of how far he'd come from that gala night. They didn't need grand declarations or dramatic gestures. Their connection had grown naturally through shared purpose and mutual respect. Whatever might develop between them would build on that foundation, not replace it. He had spent a lifetime buying what he wanted. Now the only thing he wanted with all his heart was to deserve the grace he'd been given.